Welcome back to Infidelity Tales Lab. We're incredibly grateful for your support. Before we begin today's tale, tell us, which city or country are you joining us from? We love connecting with our global audience. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Sand. Preston Harlow had always been the type of man who built things to last. His construction company, Cornerstone Builders, reflected that philosophy. Solid foundations, premium materials, and impeccable craftsmanship. At 42, he had transformed a small subcontracting outfit into one of Nevada's most respected construction firms. His weathered hands bore the calluses of a man who hadn't forgotten his roots, who still visited sites regularly and wasn't afraid to demonstrate proper technique to his crews. The home he shared with his wife Vanessa in Henderson's exclusive Seven Hills neighborhood stood as a testament to his success. 5,000 square feet of custom-designed luxury with views of the Las Vegas Strip glittering in the distance. They'd been married for 15 years, and while they hadn't had children, next year had become Vanessa's standard response whenever asked. Preston had built what he believed was a life of substance and meaning. "You need to be home by 7, Vanessa reminded him over the phone. Her voice carried that particular edge it always did when discussing the dinner with her family. "Dad hates when people are late." I know. Preston replied, watching his foreman Angelo argue with a city inspector across the construction site. The inspector's being difficult about the electrical. "I'll make it work." Montgomery Delacroix, Preston's father-in-law, was hosting the family reunion at his sprawling estate in Lake Las Vegas. The patriarch of the Delacroix family commanded respect through intimidation rather than admiration. A former banking executive with connections that extended into Nevada politics, Montgomery had never approved of Preston, frequently making comments about how his daughter had married beneath her station. Preston arrived at the Delacroix estate 10 minutes early, freshly showered but still feeling the day's exhaustion in his bones. Vanessa met him in the circular driveway, stunning in an emerald dress that complemented her auburn hair. "You clean up nice," she said, straightening his tie. "Remember to mention that development deal to Daddy. He knows the commissioner." Preston nodded, though the thought of asking Montgomery for favors made his stomach turn. Inside, the mansion buzzed with Delacroix relatives, old money and sharp tongues. Vanessa's sister Cordelia air-kissed his cheek while her husband Russell, an investment banker from Chicago, offered a limp handshake. Vanessa's brother Blaine clapped Preston's shoulder too hard, already 3 drinks deep. "The working man arrives," Blaine announced, his Yale education doing nothing to mask his perpetual condescension. Montgomery Delacroix descended the grand staircase like a monarch greeting his subjects. At 70, he remained imposing, tall, silver-haired, with cold blue eyes that missed nothing. "Preston," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "I trust business is good." "Very good, sir. We just secured the Summerlin commercial project. Small potatoes compared to what Russell's firm just closed." Montgomery turned away before Preston could respond, leaving him standing alone until Vanessa slipped her arm through his. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, where Preston found himself seated between Vanessa's Aunt Patricia and her cousin's wife Melody. Across the table, he noticed Vanessa engaged in animated conversation with Dean Whitaker, Montgomery's protege from the bank. Dean was everything Preston wasn't: private school educated, country club polished, and clearly Montgomery's idea of a suitable match for his daughter. "Vanessa tells me you've been working insane hours," Melody said, filling the awkward silence. "The business doesn't run itself," Preston replied, watching as Dean leaned closer to Vanessa, whispering something that made her laugh too loudly. Something felt off. Preston had sensed it for months. Vanessa's late nights at charity events, her sudden interest in financial seminars that Dean happened to be conducting, the new perfume she wore that she claimed was just a sample from them all. But seeing them together now, the familiar way Dean's hand briefly touched Vanessa's wrist, confirmed what Preston had refused to acknowledge. Later that evening, when most guests had moved to the terrace for drinks, Preston overheard Montgomery speaking to Russell in his study. "The fool has no idea," Montgomery was saying. "Vanessa assures me it's all set up exactly as we planned. Preston stepped away, mind racing. Something was happening behind his back, something involving his wife and her family. He watched from across the room as Dean handed Vanessa a drink, their fingers lingering together longer than necessary. The pieces weren't fitting together yet, but Preston felt the foundation of his life beginning to crack beneath him. Chapter 2. Paper Trails. 2 weeks after the family reunion, Preston sat in his home office reviewing Cornerstone's quarterly financials when he noticed discrepancies. Several large transfers had left the company account, transfers he hadn't authorized. Further investigation revealed similar withdrawals from their joint personal accounts over the past 6 months, totaling nearly $800,000. Preston called their accountant, Wayne Simmons, who had been handling both their personal and business finances for years. "Wayne, I'm looking at some transfers I didn't authorize. What the hell is going on?" There was a long pause. "Preston, Vanessa said you approved everything. She had the signed documents." "What signed documents?" Another uncomfortable silence. "You might want to speak with your wife about this." Preston hung up and began digging deeper. He found emails between Vanessa and Wayne discussing Preston's investment strategy and the transition plan. His signature appeared on documents he'd never seen. In the bedroom, he discovered a burner phone tucked inside Vanessa's jewelry box. The text messages between her and Dean told a story that turned Preston's blood cold. "Everything's ready. Dad's lawyer has drawn up all the paperwork. Once P signs the final documents next week, the accounts will be emptied and transferred offshore. By the time he figures it out, we'll be gone." "What if he doesn't sign?" "He will. He trusts me completely. Besides, the documents look like routine business stuff. He never reads the fine print." There was more. Explicit messages detailing their affair, mocking Preston's obliviousness, planning their future together with his money. Vanessa and Dean had been seeing each other for over a year, but the betrayal went beyond infidelity. They were systematically looting everything he'd built, and Montgomery was helping them do it. Preston drove to his office and pulled security camera footage. He watched as Vanessa entered late one night with Dean, using the key Preston had given her for emergencies. They accessed his files, photographed documents, and Dean made copies of signature pages while Vanessa kept lookout. Even more damning, he found footage of Vanessa meeting with several of his biggest clients, accompanied by Dean and sometimes Montgomery. His phone rang. "Vanessa. Honey, don't forget we have the dinner at Daddy's tonight. He wants to discuss that investment opportunity he mentioned." "Right," Preston said calmly. "I wouldn't miss it." After hanging up, Preston called Angelo, his most trusted employee and friend since their days working construction in South Boston. "I need a favor, no questions asked." That evening, Preston arrived at Montgomery's estate with a small bag containing his laptop, the evidence he'd gathered, and something else: insurance. The entire Delacroix family was there, plus Dean and several associates from Montgomery's bank. They were celebrating something, though no one had bothered to tell Preston what. After dinner, Montgomery tapped his crystal glass. "I'd like to make an announcement. Whitaker Financial Advisors is expanding, with Dean acquiring a significant new portfolio of clients." Montgomery smiled coldly at Preston. "In fact, many of them are currently clients of Cornerstone Builders." The room erupted in congratulatory remarks, while Preston maintained his poker face. Vanessa squeezed his hand under the table, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Now," Montgomery continued, "there's just some paperwork to finalize. Preston, if you could join us in my study." Preston followed Montgomery, Dean, and Vanessa into the book-lined room where Montgomery's lawyer waited with documents spread across the mahogany desk. "These are just formalities," the lawyer explained, sliding papers toward Preston. "Authorizations for the final transfers we discussed." "Of course," Preston said pleasantly, reaching for his pen. "But before I sign, I like to check my accounts, make sure everything's in order." The room stilled as Preston pulled out his phone. His expression darkened as he scrolled through his banking app. "That's odd," he said, looking up. "My accounts have already been emptied. Every last cent gone." Montgomery's smile thinned. "Banking errors happen all the time. Sign the papers, and we'll sort it out." Preston looked at Vanessa, whose face had lost its color. "Did you know about this, honey?" Vanessa glanced at her father, then Dean. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. No misunderstanding, Preston said, his voice hardening. My accounts were drained this afternoon. All of them. And not by some banking error. Now see here, Montgomery began. No, you see here, Preston cut him off. I know everything. The affair, the embezzlement, the client poaching. All of it. Montgomery recovered quickly, his patrician mask slipping to reveal the predator beneath. What's done is done. The money's gone, transferred through channels you'll never trace. Your company's finished. Half your clients have already signed with Dean. You're ruined, and no one here will testify against family. Vanessa stepped forward. Preston, be reasonable. This is happening whether you like it or not. Sign the papers, and we'll give you enough to start over somewhere else. Preston stared at her, the woman he'd loved for 15 years, now a stranger looking at him with cold calculation. After our family reunion, I checked my account. IT was drained, Preston said, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent house. My wife's father snorted. We needed it more than you. Montgomery laughed dismissively. And what exactly do you think you can do about it? You're finished, boy. Trembling, I reached for my bag and said, Then you won't mind what's coming next. Preston unzipped his bag. The Delacroix family exchanged amused glances, Montgomery and Dean chuckling at what they perceived as impotent rage. As they laughed, a loud bang shook the house. The door flew open, and Angelo walked in with 2 Nevada Gaming Commission officers and an FBI agent. What is the meaning of this? Montgomery demanded. Mr. Delacroix, said the lead agent, we have a warrant to search these premises and seize all financial records related to Whitaker Financial Advisors and Delacroix banking interests. Preston pulled a flash drive from his bag. You should start with this. 6 months of documented fraud, recorded conversations discussing money laundering through Montgomery's casino investments, and evidence of bribing state officials. This is absurd, Montgomery sputtered. You have no proof. Actually, I do, Preston said calmly. When I realized something was wrong, I started gathering evidence. Hidden cameras in my office caught Vanessa and Dean stealing documents. I've recorded all our conversations for the past 3 months. And Angelo has been documenting every client meeting where you and Dean made false claims about Cornerstone's financial stability. Dean lunged for the door, but was intercepted by one of the officers. Vanessa collapsed into a chair, her face ashen. You set us up, she whispered. No, Preston replied. I just made sure I wasn't the only one who got burned. As the officers began reading rights and securing computers, Preston walked out, leaving behind the life he'd thought he had and the people who had tried to destroy him. But this wasn't the end. It was barely the beginning of what he had planned. Chapter 3, Aftershocks. The arrests of Montgomery Delacroix, Dean Whitaker, and 6 associates made the front page of the Las Vegas Review-Journal. The scandal expanded as investigators uncovered decades of financial manipulation, tax evasion, and influence peddling. Vanessa wasn't arrested. Preston had made sure the evidence implicated her morally, but not criminally. But she was named in multiple civil suits as investigators froze all Delacroix family assets. Preston didn't attend the arraignments. He was busy rebuilding, calling in favors from industry contacts who'd always respected his work ethic, even if they'd been dazzled by Montgomery's connections. Angelo stepped up as operations manager, freeing Preston to handle damage control with clients. 3 weeks after the arrests, Preston received a visitor at his job site. Russell, Vanessa's brother-in-law, looking considerably less polished than the last time they'd met. Everything's frozen, Russell explained, fidgeting with his wedding ring. Cordelia and I can't access any accounts. The bank is foreclosing on our Chicago property. Sounds rough, Preston replied without sympathy, reviewing blueprints while Russell shifted uncomfortably. Look, I know we weren't exactly friends, but I had nothing to do with what Montgomery and Dean were planning. Cordelia and I were kept in the dark. Preston looked up. Is that why you moved your money to the Caymans 2 days before the arrests? Russell blanched. How did you? I didn't, Preston said, smiling coldly. But thanks for confirming it. I'm sure the FBI will be interested. After Russell hurried away, Angelo approached. You really think he was involved? Everyone in that family is involved in some way, Preston said. They just didn't all know the full plan. That evening, Preston returned to the empty Seven Hills house. He'd moved into a downtown apartment, but kept the house, refusing Vanessa's tearful pleas to let her stay there. She was living with her Aunt Patricia in Henderson, her credit cards canceled, her designer wardrobe seized as potential assets derived from fraud. Preston poured himself a bourbon and surveyed what had once been their living room. The furniture remained, but he'd removed all photographs and personal items. The house felt hollow, like the marriage it had contained. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk." "Please." I had no choice. V. Preston blocked the number and finished his drink. The first phase of his response to the betrayal was complete. He'd stopped the immediate theft and ensured legal consequences. But the calculated destruction of everything and everyone who had betrayed him was just beginning. He opened his laptop and reviewed what he'd learned about the Delacroix family's hidden vulnerabilities. Montgomery's legal troubles were just the visible portion of a lifetime of manipulation and cruelty. Each family member had secrets, weaknesses, and hidden shames that Preston was methodically cataloging. His phone rang. "Angelo, you're not going to believe this," his friend said. "Blaine Delacroix just walked into the office asking for a job. Says with his family's assets frozen, he needs income." Preston laughed. "Hire him. Put him on the Mesa Vista project. Manual labor." "You're kidding. The guy's never worked a day in his life." "Exactly. Let's see if any Delacroix can actually earn their money." When Preston hung up, he stared at the blank wall where family photos had once hung. The pain of Vanessa's betrayal still burned, but it was being tempered into something harder, colder, and more durable. They had tried to destroy what he'd built. Now he would dismantle what they valued most: their reputation, their comfort, their sense of untouchable privilege. As Preston packed the last of his belongings, his lawyer called with news. The judge had denied Montgomery's request for bail. The old man would await trial in county lockup, his health already deteriorating from the stress. "He's requesting a meeting with you," the lawyer said. "Claims he has information you'd want." "No meetings," Preston replied firmly. "No deals." Later that night, Preston entered a private room at the Velvet Rabbit, an exclusive members-only club in downtown Las Vegas. 3 men waited for him: a Nevada Gaming Commission investigator, a senior FBI agent, and District Attorney Howard Milner. "Gentlemen," Preston said, sitting down, "let's talk about how deep this investigation really needs to go." Chapter 4. New Foundations. 6 months passed. Preston had moved Cornerstone's headquarters to a renovated warehouse in the Arts District and expanded operations to include 3 neighboring states. His company's reputation for integrity in an industry often plagued by shortcuts had only been enhanced by the Delacroix scandal. When clients asked about his messy divorce from Vanessa, finally completed after months of legal wrangling, Preston simply said, "Some foundations can't be repaired." Angelo had proven himself invaluable, now officially Preston's partner in the business. Together, they'd implemented a transparency protocol that made their financial operations visible to all stakeholders, the opposite of the secretive dealings that had enabled the Delacroix scheme. On a cool October morning, Preston stood watching the sunrise from his new penthouse overlooking the Strip. His phone chimed with a news alert. Montgomery Delacroix had accepted a plea deal implicating several prominent Nevada officials in exchange for a reduced sentence. At 71, even 10 years in a minimum security facility likely amounted to a life sentence. Preston felt no satisfaction, only a cold certainty that justice was incomplete. The legal system could punish Montgomery's crimes, but not the calculated cruelty, the years of condescension, the pleasure the old man had taken in planning Preston's downfall with his own daughter. His intercom buzzed. "There's a Sophia Reynolds here to see you," his assistant announced. Preston didn't recognize the name, but instructed her to send the visitor up. When he opened the door, he was surprised to see an elegantly dressed woman in her 30s with Montgomery's distinctive blue eyes. "You don't know me," she said without preamble. "I'm Montgomery's daughter." His other daughter. Preston let her in, intrigued despite his suspicion. Sophia explained that she was Montgomery's child from an affair with his secretary in the 1980s, kept secret from his family, but financially supported through untraceable offshore accounts. He called me from prison, Sophia said, accepting the coffee Preston offered. Told me to find you, that you'd want to hear what I know. Which is? The money your wife and my father stole from you. Most of it isn't frozen in the accounts the FBI found. Montgomery always kept his real wealth elsewhere. Preston studied her. Why would you tell me this? Because Montgomery Delacroix controlled my mother's life and mine through financial dependence. When he was arrested, that money stopped. I've been investigating on my own and found evidence of accounts even the feds don't know about. Evidence you're willing to share with me, Preston said skeptically. Out of what? Family solidarity? Sophia's smile held no warmth. No. Revenge. Did you know Montgomery forced my mother to give up her career, kept her as a secret mistress for 20 years, then discarded her when she got cancer? I watched her die while he refused to acknowledge her existence. By the time Sophia left, Preston had copies of her documentation and a new perspective on the depths of Montgomery's manipulation. The old man hadn't just targeted Preston. He'd spent decades controlling and discarding people. That afternoon, Preston received another visitor, Blaine Delacroix, unrecognizable from the arrogant brother-in-law who'd mocked him at family gatherings. After 6 months working construction under Angelo's demanding supervision, Blaine had lost his soft paunch and privileged slouch. His hands were calloused, his once pampered skin weathered by the Nevada sun. Preston, I need to talk to you about something important, Blaine said, declining the offered seat. He seemed uncomfortable in the office setting, more at ease now on the work sites. I'm listening. You should know that Dean has been in contact with Vanessa from prison. They're still planning something. Preston raised an eyebrow. Why tell me? Blaine looked down at his roughened hands. Working for you, actually earning my check. It's changed how I see things. My father raised us to believe we were entitled to success without effort, that rules were for other people. He met Preston's gaze. I was wrong about you. We all were. After Blaine left, Preston called Angelo. I need you to reach out to our contact at the FBI. Have them check visitor logs and phone records for Dean Whitaker. That evening, Preston met with Howard Milner, the district attorney who'd led the prosecution against Montgomery. Since the Delacroix case had boosted Milner's profile and positioned him for a run at the governor's office, he'd been receptive to Preston's occasional requests. Dean Whitaker has been coordinating with outside associates, Preston explained, showing Milner the evidence Sophia had provided. There are accounts the investigation missed. Milner whistled at the numbers. This would upgrade the charges significantly. Might even void his plea agreement. I thought you'd appreciate that information, Preston said. By the way, how are the arrangements for the State Construction Industry Award dinner coming? My assistant sent over the confirmed list of attendees. Your contribution to the event is most appreciated, Milner replied carefully. I understand the governor will be making a special announcement regarding infrastructure projects. As Preston left the DA's office, his phone buzzed with an email from his private investigator. New information about Vanessa's activities. Despite her family's fall from grace, she'd managed to maintain relationships with some of Las Vegas's elite, carefully cultivating sympathy as the unwitting victim of her father and lover's schemes. Preston forwarded the email to his lawyer with instructions to accelerate certain aspects of his plan. The legal consequences were just the first phase of his response. Now it was time to dismantle the remaining facades behind which the Delacroix family had concealed their true natures. Chapter 5. Calculated Moves. The Las Vegas Society columns were buzzing about the remarkable rehabilitation of Vanessa Delacroix Harlow. Through carefully managed appearances at charity events, tearful interviews claiming she'd been manipulated by her father and Dean, and the strategic deployment of remaining family connections, she had managed to create a narrative of victimhood that was gaining traction. Preston watched this performance from a distance, gathering information through his growing network of sources. Vanessa had moved from her aunt's guest house to a luxury condo in Summerlin, supposedly paid for by friends sympathetic to her situation. She'd found work in an art gallery owned by the wife of a state senator, despite having no background in art beyond shopping for decorative pieces for their home. On a Friday evening, Preston attended a charity gala at the Bellagio benefiting children's education. an event he knew Vanessa would attend. He arrived with Sophia Reynolds on his arm, her resemblance to Montgomery subtle but unmistakable to anyone who knew the family well. Vanessa froze when she spotted them across the room, champagne flute hovering halfway to her lips. Preston nodded, slightly in acknowledgement, before continuing his conversation with the Clark County Commissioner about upcoming infrastructure projects. Later, as Preston examined silent auction items, Vanessa approached alone, her composure visibly forced. "Preston," she said softly, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I support children's education," he replied neutrally. "Always have." "Your companion looks familiar." Preston smiled. "She should. Sophia Reynolds. Your half-sister." Vanessa's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide her shock. "That's absurd. I don't have a half-sister. Your father kept many secrets, Vanessa. Sophia is just one of them." Vanessa glanced across the room, where Sophia was chatting with a prominent casino executive. "What game are you playing, Preston?" "No game. Just ensuring the truth emerges." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Like the truth about your continued communication with Dean, or about the account in Belize that somehow escaped the asset freeze." The color drained from Vanessa's face. "You can't prove." "I already have." Preston cut her off. "The FBI is executing new search warrants as we speak. Your carefully constructed victim narrative is about to collapse." Vanessa grabbed his arm. "Preston, please. I've lost everything. My family, my home, my reputation. What more do you want?" "Justice," Preston replied simply, removing her hand from his arm. "Nothing more, nothing less." As he walked away, Vanessa called after him, "I loved you once. Doesn't that count for anything?" Preston turned. "Yes, it counts. It's why this isn't over yet." The next morning, Preston reviewed phone records provided by his FBI contact. Dean Whitaker had made 17 calls to a burner phone linked to Russell, Vanessa's brother-in-law, who was supposedly cooperating with authorities against Montgomery. The conspiracy was broader than even Preston had suspected. At Cornerstone's headquarters, Preston found Blaine waiting in his office. "You didn't tell me our sister was at the gala last night," Blaine said, his expression troubled. "Half-sister," Preston corrected, "and it wasn't my place to break that news to the entire Delacroix family." Blaine sat heavily in the visitor's chair. "Dad's attorney called me this morning. The plea deal's been revoked. Apparently new evidence has emerged." "I heard," Preston replied, not mentioning his role in providing that evidence. "He'll die in prison," Blaine said, not quite a question. "Probably." Blaine studied Preston. "You're systematically destroying my entire family." "No," Preston countered. "Your family self-destructed through greed and deception. I'm just making sure no one escapes the consequences." After Blaine left, Preston called Angelo. "How's the Mesa Vista project coming?" "On schedule, but there's a problem with the soil analysis. The results don't match what we were given during bidding." Preston smiled grimly. The Mesa Vista development was a luxury residential community being built on land formerly owned by a Delacroix family trust, land that had been sold to developers in a fire sale when the family's assets were frozen. The discrepancy Angelo had found suggested deliberate misrepresentation in the environmental reports. "Have our engineers document everything. Then call Howard Milner directly." That evening, Preston met with Senator Calvin Brooks at a discreet steakhouse off the Strip. Brooks had been one of Montgomery's political allies, though he'd quickly distanced himself when the scandal broke. "I understand your former sister-in-law works for my wife's gallery," Brooks said, cutting into his porterhouse. "A fortunate arrangement for Vanessa," Preston replied, "especially given her limited employment history." Brooks studied Preston carefully. Catherine has always been soft-hearted. When Vanessa approached her with that sob story about being manipulated by her father and that investment advisor, Dean Whitaker, Preston supplied, currently facing additional federal charges for hidden accounts recently discovered in Belize. The senator set down his knife and fork. "Preston, I've served Nevada for 15 years. I can count on one hand the people who've tried to leverage information against me. I'm not leveraging anything, Senator. Just sharing information about ongoing investigations that might touch your wife's business associates." Brooks nodded slowly. Catherine mentioned the gallery might need to reduce staff soon. Economy's uncertain. A prudent decision, Preston agreed. By the way, my company is bidding on a new state government complex. I hope the procurement process will be transparent and merit-based. I've always advocated for transparency, Brooks said, signaling for the check. Later that night, Preston received a text from Sophia. She's making moves. Contacted 3 people from the offshore account list today. Preston replied with a single word, good. Every action Vanessa took to access hidden funds only generated more evidence against her and her remaining allies. Preston had laid his trap carefully, and now she was walking into it with predictable desperation. Chapter 6. Pressure Points. The press conference outside the federal building featured Howard Milner announcing expanded charges against Dean Whitaker and new indictments against 4 associates, including Russell, Vanessa's brother-in-law. The discovery of hidden accounts in Belize had unraveled the remaining threads of the conspiracy, exposing the full extent of the Delacroix family's financial manipulation. Preston watched the coverage from his office, noting with satisfaction that Milner specifically thanked concerned citizens who provided crucial evidence. The prosecutor's political aspirations made him an eager partner in Preston's methodical dismantling of the Delacroix network. Angelo entered with coffee and the morning's construction reports. Russell's wife is outside. Says she needs to see you urgently. Cordelia Delacroix had aged a decade in the months since her family's downfall. The designer clothes and perfect grooming that had been her armor were gone, replaced by a department store pantsuit and minimal makeup. They arrested Russell this morning, she said without preamble. Agents came to our rental house at dawn. They took him away in handcuffs in front of our children. I saw the news, Preston replied calmly. Federal charges are serious. This is your doing, Cordelia accused, tears threatening. You won't stop until you've destroyed everyone connected to Montgomery. Preston leaned forward. Your husband helped drain my accounts and steal my clients. He moved money offshore 2 days before the initial arrests, proving he knew exactly what was happening. He was following orders. My father controlled everything. Our finances, our social connections, our futures. Russell did what he had to do to protect our family. At my expense, Preston reminded her. What would you have done in my position, Cordelia? Forgiven the people who tried to ruin me. Cordelia's shoulders slumped. What do you want? There must be something. Information, Preston said. Everything you know about Vanessa's current activities, her contacts, her plans, and testimony against Russell if it comes to trial. You want me to turn on my own family? They turned on each other the moment they started hiding assets instead of coming clean. Montgomery sacrificed Dean, who implicated Russell. That's not family loyalty, Cordelia. That's every person for themselves. After she left, having agreed to Preston's terms, Angelo shook his head. You're playing a dangerous game, boss. These people are desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, Preston replied. That's counting on. That afternoon, Preston visited the construction site for the Mesa Vista development, where environmental inspectors were taking new soil samples. The discovery of chemical contaminants had halted construction pending a full investigation. The development company, which had purchased the land from the Delacroix family trust, now faced potential bankruptcy from remediation costs and lawsuits from early buyers. Preston had pointed investigators toward testing results that had been altered during the original environmental review, a review supervised by Montgomery's longtime associate on the county zoning board. Another piece of the Delacroix legacy unraveling. As Preston surveyed the idle construction equipment, a black SUV pulled up alongside his truck. The driver's window lowered to reveal Vanessa, looking haggard despite her careful makeup. They fired me from the gallery, she said without greeting. Catherine Brooks personally escorted me out. The art world can be fickle, Preston remarked. This was you. Just like Russell's arrest, the new charges against Daddy, the Mesa Vista scandal. All you. Preston didn't deny it. Actions have consequences, Vanessa. What do you want from me? She demanded, her voice cracking. I've lost everything. My family, my home, my reputation. I'm barely surviving on what friends slipped me under the table. Friends like Colin Mercer? Preston asked, naming a wealthy developer who'd been photographed escorting Vanessa to recent events. I wonder if his wife knows he's paying your rent. Vanessa's face hardened. You're monitoring me. Carefully, Preston confirmed. Every move, every call, every desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage of your life. You were never this cruel before, she whispered. I was never betrayed by everyone I trusted before, he countered. You, your father, Dean, you all taught me an important lesson about mercy. It's wasted on people who mistake it for weakness. As Vanessa drove away, Preston received a call from his contact at the Gaming Commission. Montgomery's previously undisclosed stake in 3 Las Vegas casinos had been confirmed, triggering automatic regulatory reviews and potential license revocations. Another financial domino falling in the carefully arranged sequence Preston had engineered. That evening, Preston met with Sophia at a quiet restaurant in Summerlin. She'd become an unexpected ally, her hatred for Montgomery fueling her willingness to help dismantle his empire. Russell's arrest has Vanessa panicking, Sophia reported. She tried to access one of the Cayman accounts this morning, but found it frozen. She doesn't realize every move she makes springs another trap. And your mother's foundation? Preston asked. Sophia smiled. Fully funded with the money from Montgomery's Singapore account that mysteriously found its way back to the States. The Margaret Reynolds Cancer Treatment Center breaks ground next month. Preston nodded, satisfied. Part of his strategy had involved redirecting recovered Delacroix funds to causes that would horrify Montgomery, like a sinner name for his discarded mistress. What happens when there's nothing left to take from them? Sophia asked. When they've lost everything, then they'll understand what they tried to do to me, Preston replied. But we're not there yet. Vanessa still believes she can salvage something from this disaster. She needs to learn that some betrayals can't be undone. As Preston drove home, he received a text from Blaine. Emergency at Mesa Vista. Environment team found something bigger than contamination. You need to see this. Preston redirected toward the development site, unaware that the next phase of his revenge was about to accelerate beyond even his careful planning. Chapter 7. Buried Truths. The Mesa Vista construction site was illuminated by portable floodlights, casting harsh shadows across the desert landscape. Yellow crime scene tape cordoned off a section where county officials and police officers clustered around a deep excavation. Blaine waited by the security checkpoint, his face grim. What's happening? Preston asked as they walked toward the commotion. The environmental team was taking deep core samples and hit something metal. They thought it was an old storage tank, but Blaine swallowed hard. It's a car, Preston, buried about 15 feet down. Preston felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. A car. In 1997 Mercedes, with human remains inside. By morning, the discovery was headline news. A vehicle containing skeletal remains had been unearthed on former Delacroix family property. The car belonged to Martin Hargrove, a business rival of Montgomery's who had disappeared in 1998 after threatening to expose irregularities in a major development deal. The case had gone cold when Hargrove's boat was found adrift in Lake Mead, suggesting a boating accident. Preston watched the press coverage from his office, pieces falling into place that he hadn't arranged. This discovery wasn't part of his meticulously planned revenge. It was an unexpected acceleration, a buried secret literally emerging from the ground. Howard Milner arrived at Cornerstone's headquarters personally, bypassing assistants to stride directly into Preston's office. Tell me you didn't know about this, he demanded without greeting. The buried car? I'm as shocked as anyone. Milner studied him skeptically. This changes everything. We're no longer talking financial crimes. We're talking homicide. Montgomery couldn't have buried a car and body alone, Preston observed. No, Milner agreed. And that's where it gets interesting. Initial forensic examination suggests Hargrove was killed elsewhere, then transported to the site. The car was crushed and buried during the initial development of that land, when it was being prepared for a Delacroix family compound that was never built. Who was overseeing that development? Milner's expression was grim. According to county records, the project manager was Dean Whitaker, Montgomery's protege, your wife's lover, and currently our key witness against Montgomery himself. Preston leaned back, connecting implications. So Dean either helped Montgomery commit murder or knows who did. Exactly. And now Dean has to decide whether maintaining loyalty to Montgomery is worth facing murder charges himself. After Milner left, Preston called Sophia. Did you know about Martin Hargrove? A long pause. Not specifically, but my mother always said Montgomery had made problems disappear in the past. I assumed she meant financial problems or business rivals, not this. Things are about to escalate beyond financial crimes. Are you prepared for that? Are you? Sophia countered. This isn't just exposing fraud anymore, Preston. You're tugging on threads that lead to much darker places. That evening, Preston received a visitor he hadn't expected. Catherine Brooks, the senator's wife and owner of the gallery that had recently fired Vanessa. This isn't a social call, she said as Preston offered her a seat in his living room. My husband doesn't know I'm here. I assumed as much. What can I do for you, Mrs. Brooks? Catherine placed a flash drive on the coffee table. This contains security footage from my gallery. Specifically, conversations between Vanessa and certain visitors when she thought no one was watching. Preston picked up the drive. Why give this to me? Because Vanessa Delacroix used my friendship and sympathy to establish contact with people connected to my husband's political career. Because she recorded private conversations in my gallery using equipment hidden in her desk. And because when I confronted her, she threatened to release damaging information about Calvin if I didn't continue protecting her. Blackmail, Preston said. Catherine nodded. Calvin may have had indiscretions in the past, but he's a good man who's served Nevada well. I won't let Vanessa destroy that to save herself. After Catherine left, Preston reviewed the security footage. Vanessa meeting clandestinely with several prominent business figures, including Colin Mercer, all of whom had past dealings with Montgomery. In one particularly damning clip, she explicitly mentioned leveraging what we know about them to secure financial support now that her official channels were blocked. Preston forwarded the footage to Howard Milner with a short message. You might want to expand your investigation to include extortion. The next morning brought news that Dean Whitaker had requested an urgent meeting with federal prosecutors, offering new information in exchange for considerations regarding the Hargrove case. The careful dominoes Preston had arranged were now falling faster than he had planned, each collapse triggering unexpected consequences. Blaine called midday. Cordelia just called me in hysterics. The FBI is at her house with another search warrant. They're tearing the place apart, looking for documents related to the Mesa Vista property. That would have been before your father transferred it to the family trust, Preston noted. Preston, Blaine hesitated. I worked that land during the initial excavation, just for a summer during college. If they start questioning everyone involved, then answer honestly, Preston advised. Either you know something about Hargrove's death or you don't. It's not that simple, Blaine said, his voice strained. None of this is as simple as good guys and bad guys. My father, he did terrible things, yes, but he also protected the family, sometimes from themselves. After hanging up, Preston received an alert that Montgomery Delacroix had been transferred to the prison medical facility. The strain of the new murder investigation, combined with his age and deteriorating health, had resulted in a cardiac event requiring immediate intervention. Preston felt no satisfaction at the news. Montgomery's death would be too easy, an escape from facing the full consequences of his actions. Preston wanted him alive to witness the complete dismantling of everything he'd built, every relationship he'd manipulated, every lie he'd constructed. That night, as Preston reviewed construction bids for an upcoming project, his security system alerted him to a breach at the perimeter of his property. The surveillance cameras showed Vanessa, clearly intoxicated, attempting to override the gate code. Instead of calling security, Preston remotely unlocked the gate and waited. Minutes later, his doorbell rang. Vanessa stood swaying slightly on his doorstep, her expensive outfit rumpled, her makeup smeared by tears. They're saying Daddy killed someone, she said without preamble. That Dean helped him. The evidence seems to point that way, Preston replied, not inviting her in. It's a lie, she insisted. It has to be. My father is many things, but not a murderer. People are capable of anything when enough money or power is at stake, Preston said. You taught me that. Vanessa's expression hardened through her tears. This is what you wanted all along, isn't it? Not just to take back what was yours, but to destroy us completely. To salt the earth where the Delacroix family once stood. You tried to ruin me, Preston reminded her. You and your father and your lover planned to take everything I'd built and leave me with nothing. What did you expect me to do? Forgive and forget. I expected mercy from the man I lived with for 15 years, Vanessa said. The man who once told me he'd love me no matter what. Preston studied the woman he'd once believed was his partner, seeing clearly the manipulation still present even in her desperation. That man died the day he discovered his wife's betrayal. As Vanessa turned to leave, she paused. You've become exactly what you claim to hate about my father. Cold, calculating, ruthless. Congratulations, Preston. You've won. We're ruined. I hope it brings you peace. After she left, Preston poured himself a bourbon and stood looking out over the lights of Las Vegas. Vanessa's words echoed uncomfortably. Had he become like Montgomery in his pursuit of justice? The thought troubled him, but not enough to alter his course. The Delacroix family had declared war on him. He was simply ensuring their complete and unconditional surrender. Chapter 8. Collision Course. The headline dominated local news. Murder conspiracy exposed. Dean Whitaker implicates Delacroix in 1998 killing. Dean had cut a deal, providing detailed testimony about Montgomery's role in Martin Hargrove's death and the subsequent cover-up. In exchange, prosecutors would recommend a reduced sentence on the financial crimes and immunity from murder charges. Preston's phone rang. Howard Milner. Have you seen the news? I have. Congratulations on breaking the case. This goes beyond Hargrove, Milner said, his voice tense. Dean's talking about other problems Montgomery solved permanently. We're looking at potentially 3 more bodies. Jesus, Preston breathed, genuinely shocked. And Dean was involved in all of them. Not directly, no, but he helped with cover-ups, disposing of evidence, creating alibis. He was Montgomery's fixer before moving up to financial partner and apparently your wife's lover. After the call, Preston sat processing this new information. The financial crimes and betrayal had been personal, calculated blows aimed specifically at him. But murder? That suggested a darkness in Montgomery Delacroix that exceeded even Preston's understanding of the man's ruthlessness. Angelo entered without knocking. Preston, you need to see this. Now, he thrust a tablet displaying security camera footage from their Mesa Vista site. The timestamp showed 3:17 a.m., and the night vision camera clearly captured Blaine Delacroix accessing the construction trailer, removing something from a locked cabinet, then hurriedly leaving. When was this discovered? Preston asked. Security review this morning. The environmental team reported missing documentation from their files, specifically the original soil testing reports from when the property was first developed. Preston's mind raced. Blaine worked that site during college. He said it himself. You think he knew about Hargrove? I think he knows more than he's admitted, Preston replied. Get him in here. Today. Before Angelo could respond, Preston's phone buzzed with an alert from his home security system. Someone had triggered the perimeter alarm again. The camera showed a black sedan parked haphazardly at his gate, but no visible driver or passengers. I need to handle this, Preston told Angelo. Fine, Blaine. 20 minutes later, Preston arrived at his gated property to find police and paramedics already on scene. The black sedan had crashed into a security gate with enough force to deploy the airbags. Behind the wheel, unconscious and bleeding from a head wound, was Vanessa. She's heavily intoxicated, the responding officer explained. Looks like she lost control and hit the gate at speed. Paramedics are stabilizing her for transport. Preston watched as they loaded Vanessa into an ambulance, her face pale beneath an oxygen mask. Despite everything, seeing her injured stirred unwelcome emotions, concern, regret, echoes of the connection they'd once shared. At the hospital, Preston provided Vanessa's medical history to the attending physician and then waited while they performed tests. A nurse directed him to a small waiting area, assuming he was still Vanessa's husband despite his clarification about their divorce status. 2 hours later, the doctor emerged. Mrs. Harlow is stable. Concussion, facial lacerations, bruised ribs from the airbag deployment. We're keeping her overnight for observation, especially given her blood alcohol level. Can I see her? Preston asked, surprising himself with the request. The doctor led him to a private room where Vanessa lay sleeping, and in her arm, bandages on her forehead and cheek. She looked vulnerable in a way that contradicted everything Preston now knew about her. The calculation, the deception, the willingness to destroy him for her own benefit. Preston sat in the visitor's chair, studying her face. 15 years of marriage, now tainted by betrayal. Had there ever been genuine love, or had it all been Montgomery's long-term strategy to position his daughter to eventually take what Preston built? Vanessa's eyes fluttered open, confusion giving way to recognition. Preston, what are you doing here? You crashed into my gate, he said simply. I wanted to make sure you were all right. She turned away, wincing at the movement. Why? You've been systematically destroying what's left of my life. I've been pursuing justice, Preston corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Vanessa asked, her voice bitter. Dean is testifying that my father committed murder. Multiple murders. The man who raised me, who I thought I knew. Her voice broke. Did you know? When you started this vendetta, did you know you'd uncover this? No, Preston admitted. I was focused on the financial crimes against me. The rest emerged on its own. Vanessa was silent for a long moment. I didn't know about Hargrove, or any of it. I need you to believe that. But you knew about the plan to ruin me, Preston pointed out. You were an active participant in that. Yes, she whispered, tears tracking down her cheeks. I can't undo that. But Preston, it wasn't always a lie. What we had, in the beginning at least, was real. Preston stood. Get some rest, Vanessa. The doctors want to keep you overnight. As he reached the door, Vanessa called after him. Did you ever really love me? Or was I just another acquisition, like your company and your house? Things that proved you'd succeeded? The question hit uncomfortably close to truths Preston hadn't examined. I love the person I thought you were, he finally answered. That person doesn't exist. When Preston returned to his office, he found Angelo waiting with Detective Ray Salazar from Homicide. Mr. Harlow, we need to talk about Blaine Delacroix, Salazar said without preamble. He's missing, and based on evidence we've uncovered, we believe he may have been directly involved in Martin Hargrove's murder. Preston sat heavily. That's not possible. Blaine was barely out of his teens when Hargrove disappeared. 22, Salazar corrected. And according to Dean Whitaker's testimony, Blaine was present when Montgomery confronted Hargrove at the family's Lake Las Vegas property. The confrontation escalated, and Blaine allegedly struck Hargrove with a boat or during the altercation, causing his death. The revelation stunned Preston. Blaine, the entitled brother-in-law who'd become one of his most reliable workers. The killer? I just spoke with him yesterday. He mentioned working at the Mesa Vista site during college, but we believe he removed evidence from your construction trailer last night, Salazar continued. Specifically, documents that might have placed him at the scene when Hargrove's car was buried. After the detective left, Preston called Sophia. Did you know about Blaine's involvement in Hargrove's death? No, she replied, sounding genuinely shocked. Montgomery never mentioned Blaine being directly involved in anything serious. He was always the family screw-up, the one who needed protection from his own bad decisions. Well, now he's missing, and the police think he might have killed Hargrove. This is spiraling beyond what either of us anticipated, Sophia said. The question is, what are you going to do about it? What indeed? Preston thought as he ended the call. His campaign of methodical revenge against the Delacroix family had unearthed darker secrets than financial fraud. Now a murder investigation was in progress. Vanessa was hospitalized after crashing into his gate. Montgomery was in a prison medical facility, and Blaine, the one family member who'd shown genuine remorse and growth, was a fugitive murder suspect. The justice Preston had sought was being overshadowed by consequences he hadn't intended and couldn't control. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, He questioned whether he'd gone too far in his pursuit of retribution. His phone rang again, an unknown number. "Preston, it's Blaine. Don't hang up." The younger man's voice was tense, background noise suggesting he was in a moving vehicle. "I need to talk to you. In person. No police. You're a murder suspect, Blaine. I should call Detective Salazar right now." "It wasn't murder," Blaine insisted. "It was an accident. And if you want the full truth about everything, including what really happened with your accounts and why Vanessa got involved, you'll meet me. Alone." Despite his better judgment, Preston agreed. "Where?" "The old quarry off Highway 160. 1 hour. Come alone, or I disappear for good." As Preston grabbed his keys, Angelo blocked his path. "Boss, where are you going?" "To get answers," Preston replied. "Real ones, finally." Chapter 9. Scorched Earth. The abandoned quarry stretched before Preston like a massive wound in the desert landscape, its terraced walls glowing amber in the setting sun. He parked next to Blaine's truck, the only other vehicle visible in the desolate location, and approached cautiously, scanning for any sign of his former brother-in-law. "Up here," called Blaine's voice from a ridge about 30 feet above. He stood silhouetted against the darkening sky, his posture tense but not threatening. Preston climbed the rough path to the ridge, where Blaine had created a makeshift campsite, cooler, lantern, and a duffel bag suggesting he'd been hiding out for at least a day. "You could have picked somewhere less melodramatic," Preston commented, keeping a safe distance. Blaine offered a thin smile. "Seemed appropriate. This quarry provided the concrete for most of the Delacroix developments in the 90s, including the foundation where Hargrove was buried. So it's true. You were involved." Blaine nodded, his expression haunted. "Not how Dean described it. Hargrove came to confront my father about fraudulent environmental reports that allowed development on contaminated land. Land like Mesa Vista. The same issue we discovered recently," Preston noted. "History repeating itself." Blaine agreed bitterly. "Hargrove threatened to take evidence to federal authorities. There was an argument on my father's boat. Hargrove attacked him, and I reacted, hit him with an oar. He fell, struck his head on the cleat, died instantly. And instead of reporting an accident, Montgomery decided to bury him in his car. That was Dean's idea," Blaine said. "He convinced my father that even justified self-defense would destroy the family reputation. So they turned an accident into a conspiracy." Preston studied the man before him. No longer the entitled playboy he'd first met, but not quite the reformed worker who'd earned respect at Cornerstone either. "Why tell me this now?" "Because you deserve to know the whole truth. About everything." Blaine sat on a boulder, fatigue evident in every movement. "The plot against you wasn't just about money. It was about Vanessa." "What do you mean?" "My sister was going to leave you anyway. She and Dean had been involved for over a year. But Montgomery saw an opportunity. Why let Vanessa simply divorce you when they could take Cornerstone in the process?" The revelation wasn't entirely surprising, but it still wounded. So the funds transfer, the client poaching, that was just a bonus on top of the affair? "Montgomery never does anything for a single reason," Blaine said. "He wanted Cornerstone's government contracts, wanted Vanessa positioned with someone he controlled, and wanted to crush you for daring to marry into the family without proper credentials." Preston absorbed this, pieces fitting together more completely. "And you're telling me this because it's time for this to end," Blaine said simply. "The Delacroix family is finished. My father will die in prison. Russell is facing years behind bars. Vanessa has lost everything that matters to her. And I'm about to turn myself in for manslaughter." "What?" Blaine stood. "I've called Detective Salazar. He's on his way now. I'm tired of running from what happened. Hargrove's family deserves closure, even after all these years." Preston felt unexpected respect for Blaine's decision. "What about the documents you took from the construction trailer?" "In my truck. Original soil reports proving the contamination was known and covered up. Evidence against my father, not me. I took them because I needed leverage to ensure I could tell my side of the story before Dean's version became the official record." As they stood in silence, headlights appeared on the access road, police vehicles approaching. "One more thing you should know," Blaine said quietly. Vanessa did love you in the beginning. Montgomery systematically poisoned that. Worked on her for years. He'd done the same to my mother until she became a shell of herself. It's what he does to everyone close to him. Before Preston could respond, Detective Salazar's voice came over a loudspeaker, instructing Blaine to remain visible and keep his hands up. With a final nod to Preston, Blaine walked down to meet the officers, hands raised in surrender. Preston watched as they placed Blaine in a patrol car, his former brother-in-law's posture suggesting relief rather than resignation. Salazar approached Preston afterward. He called us himself, the detective said, puzzled. Said he wanted to confess, but needed to talk to you first. What? Preston considered the question. I think he needed someone to witness that he was finally making his own choice, not following Montgomery's script. Later that night, Preston sat in his home office, the events of the past hours, the past months, weighing heavily. On his desk lay the final pieces of his revenge strategy against the Delacroix family, plans that now seemed hollow given the revelations about Hargrove and Blaine's surrender. His phone rang, the hospital. Vanessa had experienced complications and was asking for him. Against his better judgment, Preston drove to the medical center, where he found her awake but pale, monitors beeping steadily beside her bed. They arrested Blaine, she said without greeting. It's on the news. He turned himself in. Preston corrected, remaining at the doorway. For Martin Hargrove. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. All these years, I never knew. Never suspected my father could be involved in something like that. There's a lot none of us knew, Preston replied. Blaine said Montgomery poisoned our marriage deliberately, worked on you for years to turn you against me. Vanessa's laugh held no humor. Is that what you need to believe? That I was manipulated into betraying you? That I couldn't possibly have chosen Dean myself? Wasn't that what happened? She met his gaze directly. My father influenced me, yes. But I made my choices, Preston. I chose Dean. I chose to help take your company. Those were my decisions. The stark admission hung between them, more honest than anything she'd said since their confrontation at Montgomery's study months ago. Why tell me this now? Preston asked. Because I'm tired of living in the ruins of lies, Vanessa said quietly. My father built his life on deception. It destroyed our family. It killed a man. I don't want that legacy anymore. Preston studied her, searching for signs of manipulation, but finding only exhaustion and defeat. What happens now, Vanessa? I don't know, she admitted. Everything I had is gone. My family is shattered. My reputation is destroyed. I have nothing and no one. You made sure I'd be in exactly that position, Preston reminded her. Yes, she whispered. And now I understand what that feels like. As Preston left the hospital, his phone buzzed with a news alert. Montgomery Delacroix had died of cardiac arrest in the prison medical facility. The architect of so much manipulation and destruction was gone, escaping full justice, but leaving a legacy of ruined lives, including those of his own children. Back home, Preston retrieved the bourbon bottle but didn't pour. The vengeful satisfaction he'd anticipated feeling at the Delacroix family's complete destruction was absent, replaced by a hollow recognition of wasted potential and lives derailed by greed and deception. He opened his laptop and began composing an email to Howard Milner, attaching documentation about recovery of hidden assets that could be used to compensate victims of Montgomery's financial schemes. Justice, not vengeance, would be his final act in this saga. 2 days later, Preston stood at the edge of Lake Las Vegas, watching the sunrise paint the water gold. Angelo joined him, handing him coffee in a paper cup. Quite a week, his friend said. Montgomery dead, Blaine confessing, the DA using your evidence to prosecute 6 more associates. You won, Preston. The Delacroix empire is ashes. Preston sipped his coffee, considering this. Winning implies there was something to gain. This was about survival, then justice. There's no joy in watching people destroy themselves. Even people who try to destroy you. Especially them, Preston said quietly. Because now I understand how easily I could have become exactly like Montgomery, using people as pawns, measuring success by others' downfall. What happens with Vanessa? Angelo asked. Nothing. Preston replied firmly. She made her choices. Now she lives with them. As they walked back to their vehicles, Preston's phone rang. Sophia. I heard about my father, she said when he answered. I thought I'd feel something. Relief, satisfaction, closure. But I don't feel anything. That's probably healthier than what he'd want you to feel, Preston observed. Maybe, she agreed. The Margaret Reynolds Center is moving forward. Somehow, using his money to help the people he discarded feels like the only fitting memorial. After hanging up, Preston drove to Cornerstone's headquarters, where the day's work awaited. The company had not just survived the Delacroix conspiracy, but emerged stronger, its reputation for integrity enhanced by Preston's refusal to cut corners even in crisis. In his office, he found a small package on his desk. Inside was a key to a safe deposit box and a note in Blaine's handwriting for the victims' families. It won't bring them back, but it might help them move forward. So should you. B. Preston slipped the key into his pocket. Moving forward didn't mean forgetting the betrayal or forgiving those who had orchestrated it, but it did mean refusing to let Montgomery Delacroix's poison infect his own heart. The line between justice and vengeance was thin, and Preston had walked it carefully. As Preston reviewed plans for Cornerstone's newest project, a community center in a neglected Las Vegas neighborhood, he reflected on foundations, both literal and metaphorical. The Delacroix family had built on deception and manipulation, and that foundation had ultimately collapsed under its own corrupt weight. Preston would continue building on stronger material. Honesty, accountability, and the understanding that true strength came not from destroying enemies, but from refusing to become what they represented. The revenge he pursued had served its purpose. Justice had been delivered. Now it was time to construct something that would last. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen, and I'll see you there.